Hi and welcome to the fourth video in the series which I've been doing on the Bruder Sprinter. In the last video I focused on proportional radio control steering in the front, and in the video before that put a Tamiya gearbox in the back. In this one what I'm going to be doing is first of all finding a good home for the radio control, and I do quite like this flatbed which came from the tractor trailer set. What I'm going to try and do is fit the radio control in such that I can use this top as well as the one which is meant to come with it, with the ramps that at the moment come out of the back. And in this configuration the battery is probably going to live in one of these side pockets. In this configuration I'm going to want to try and put the battery somewhere in here if it will fit. First thing to do is just unplug stuff. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is to chop this area out here. I had thought about trying to keep this bit on the bottom, but actually I don't think that that's going to be easily possible, and if I did I would lose some of the room that I'm hoping to gain from this. So I'll just do that and then I'll be back. Well, that all came out quite quickly and easily, and I'll just tidy up in there in a moment. But what that has done is it's given me more of these plastic pieces which I actually used for the front suspension in the last video. So if that ever breaks I can easily enough make another one or several. Starting with the receiver, which I'll just mount on the back here. Now I don't want these wires to get caught up on anything when the truck's driving along, so I drilled a couple of holes and put a tyre up through. Now I'm thinking that the battery's going to be able to go in here like that. If I was to put some axles across the bottom here and here, then the battery could rest on it. So having marked out 30mm from the end here and 70 here and lining up on the moulding mark there, I'm just going to go through the 3mm drill bit. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to use some bits of silicone aeroplane fuel tubing to hold them on with. That should go at the end of these, which is fine. Then if I put one at each end, then they won't fall out, but they'll be easy enough for me to remove when I want to. And having removed a tiny bit of plastic here, that bed sits absolutely flat where it's meant to. Next thing is going to be the speed controller. Before I do, I'm going to convert the lead here, which is a little JST, I'm going to convert that over to Dean's. I'll just solder a Dean's plug on here. Time for a bit of soldering. In this stage here you need to not only think about which wires are going to join to which other wires, but where it's all going to end up. Having done a little bit of checking with this bed, and I'm trying to make it compatible with both of the beds, I've realised a couple of things. First of all, even though I want to keep the speed controller away from the receiver, there actually isn't really room at this end if I'm going to use this body, because this piece here needs really to locate at the back, and I don't want this hitting the gearbox, and I want the gearbox to have full travel. So I'm actually going to end up with the speed controller probably in here somewhere, which still isn't too close to the receiver, and it's actually the motors which cause the most interference. Now the next thing which I want to think about is the on-off switch, and I found that this is quite an important part to get sorted out during the build, because otherwise you end up with this just floating around, and it makes the model very unuser friendly if the switch isn't mounted in a good, stable, sensible place. So what I'm thinking is that quite a good place for it is probably about here. I can't go through the side of these beams here because I know that it will bump into one of those two. I don't really want it at the back for a similar sort of reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a little bracket out of a piece of the plastic which I carved out from this area here. So again, I'm going to use the L-shaped profile which comes on the main sort of beams. I'll saw a bit of that off and then mount the switch onto it. That will be a safe mount, and I'm probably only going to want about that much. This doesn't have to be that precise. I've got an L-shaped piece which is going to go in about there. I've left plenty here because I will be using the double-sided tape and I want enough for it to hold on with. Just bend out. Mark it out there. Mark it there. And a couple of 2mm screws for my bits and pieces box with nuts, and we're in business. That can move the whole amount that it needs to. Quick splash of the isopropanol alcohol to get any moulding release off the plastic. Double-sided foam tape. And I think I want that about there. That should be good, and it's nowhere near the gearbox. Well, it's near, but it's not too near. And then the speed controller, I think I'll put that about here. I've ended up putting 2 pieces of tape on this in order to clear the little switch here, which is what allows you to switch on or off the brake. And I want that to be completely below this piece here, so, but as far back as I can reasonably get it. So I think that's going to go about there. The serial wire is going to need to go somewhere. Put it round that way a bit. The hole for it in there. Post it through the hole. Then the aerial shouldn't bother us anymore. That's quite a nice fit. It's a fairly tight fit. And I think I'll tie all of these wires together because that will keep them out of the way. So putting it all together in this configuration with the tractor flatbed, the battery goes in nicely. Let's put that in there, and that's not going anywhere. We can plug it in, like so, tucking the wires in. The top goes down nicely, and our switch for turning it on and off. Right, so that, if you like, is one version of the model done. It will be possible to put a lifter on here, no doubt, but this isn't the main rear that I'm wanting to keep on this truck. the one which I want to use is this one here, and I think that even though the battery could go here, I think I'm actually going to use one of these side hatches because I think that that will fit better and be easier. The next thing to think about is to get this to go on there. I know that this area here is going to foul on a lot of the gearbox area, so that's going to have to go. I might just leave a little bit in there. No, actually I don't really need to. So I'm certainly going to trim along here. I think I'll keep the bit at the very back because there's nothing here and it's going to give it some support. So I'll probably keep from about there onwards. These places here where I've got the suspension would potentially give it trouble, and that lines up with these bits here, so I think that I'm going to want to probably trim out an area like that. I'm probably going to want to remove some material from around here, I'll soon find out, in order to post the wire through. Actually thinking about it, that there is parallel with the top of the chassis, so actually the material that I'm going to remove is more likely going to be in there. I'll just do that and then come back. And just a quick check with the battery, you can see how the battery does easily go in, but we're going to need somewhere to fold the wires. So the next thing to do is to do a quick test fit to see if all of this just goes on. Well, that all seems to be sitting on there very nicely. Right, now we finally get onto the bit of the video that I've been looking forward to since the start, and that's these ramps. Okay, as things stand, it looks as if I've slightly raised the ride height, and that's something to do with the suspension, I expect. So it isn't quite touching the ground, but it's not very far off. Now, interestingly, these actually pull out, and they look as if they're universal for a truck where you would actually have the ramps going up and down anyway. You can see these little round tabs here. Now, I did think about having a mechanism to pull them up and down, but I decided that that was going to be disproportionately difficult and actually not necessarily any better. What I'm thinking is that I'm actually going to have these going up and down using these existing bits of plastic here on the end to keep it in place, and if I find that that's not enough, I can always drill through, but I'm going to try and avoid doing that. So I can see that the next thing which I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to carefully carve out some of this area, but going no wider than the very edges of the ramp here, because if I can leave something in place to hold those bits, then it should stay in there. I think that I'm going to want the ramps coming up to about right angles with the truck bed, so probably about that angle there. So my guess is not to take out any more than 6mm. Now I can always remove more if I want to, but I can't put it back. This silver seems to be the softer plastic that Bruder use, so it shouldn't be too difficult to cut. Looks as if we're going to need to take out a little bit more. It goes up to 90 degrees, slightly over 90, but that ought to be alright. If I want this to be able to go further down, all I need to do is trim a little bit off here and here. See? Yeah, it can actually go down slightly further now. If I was to insert a rod through there, have it going down, then have a servo arm attached to it, well, if the arm went straight down and this motion was going on, the arm would end up sticking out here, so that's not something that I want. So at its maximum height, the rod that I'm going to put in, I'm going to want that going so that it doesn't foul on here. So this is the same Hobby King servo which I use for steering, and I've used in a couple of trucks. If I'm going to be putting a servo in there, and actually I'm thinking I'm going to put one each side, they're both going to have to mount round the same way if I'm going to put them on the Y lead, otherwise I'll have one ramp going up while the other one's going down, which won't be a great deal of use to me. So I'm probably going to put the servo in here somewhere, and I'm going to want my rod which I'm going to put into this to be at its maximum point, which is going to be around there. In fact, I can probably drill up through here, that ought to be alright. I think it's going to be easier to do than to explain. So taking my 2.5mm drill bit, I'm going to start off in the very centre . There. I'm then going to set my 90 degrees on my ramp and push my ramp firmly down towards the bottom. It's not too hard to hold. And then I'm going to try and drill into the bottom of the ramp from here, getting it as straight as I can. I'm only going to go to the very edge of it. I'm just going to quickly check to make sure we're going into the middle. It's not too bad. Back in again. Right. So I now have a 2.5mm hole in here, and I haven't quite gone through to the other side. The hole I've just made misses this plastic tab here, which is quite lucky. If it hadn't done, I might have been drilling another hole, or I'd have had to have got rid of this bit here. The next thing I want is an M3 bolt. I don't really want one of those black machine bolts which are really hard steel, because that's going to make it quite difficult to do the next stage. This one here that I'm going to try first has got a 20mm thread on it, and that's going to go in here, and I certainly won't tap it because I want there to be some grip, and the fact it's gone slightly into the other side is quite useful. Because that's going to allow it to hold itself in place. So I only just went into there, you can see how that's looking. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to grind this flat on both sides and drill a hole in it. I've already done one side, I'll just flip it over, do the other. Using a centre punch to decide where I want the hole, which is actually towards the top of the thread. There. And we just about have a clean hole. It might take a few attempts to get this right. I might go back and make another one in a minute, but that seems to be okay for now. And I'll just Z-bend the end of the rod. And that should be able to fit through like that without any problems. So pushing the ramp in and then screwing it up, we start to get an idea of where things are going to end up. So putting the screw back into the ramp for a moment, that's going to end up about there. What we're going to want to do is to trim out, and I'm using the set square here to get it straightish. An area roughly there, perhaps a little narrower, perhaps I'll come in a bit, in order for the screw to move up and down, so I'll just do that. Taking our ramp with its screw in, put it in the right way up. We can see how that moves from there to only straight out. So we're going to have to think about carving out some more material down here. Just pop that up for a moment. Right, it seems to go all the way down and up to a 90-degree point, and in terms of what's going on in here, it's going from there up to here. I think I've reached the conclusion that we're really going to need to put something through here to hold it in place. Right, so what I ended up doing was pushing a 2mm piece of spare rod in this side and a servo screw on the other side, and carefully drilling through here. And then it was just a case of doing a little bit of carving until, put that flat, until we got the range of movement that we wanted. So in the interest of keeping this video to a sensible sort of length, I think that last week's one of an hour was probably a little bit too long, but there was quite a lot to the steering. What I've done is I've completed this side, so I cut a slot along here in order for the control rod to rest inside here. Now the reason why I've got it going down so far is that basically you mustn't allow this piece here to go over centre, i.e. at the back of the throw, when the ramps are fully down, the place where the rod meets the arm here has to be closer to the underside of the truck bed than this piece here, otherwise the servo will just be trying to push it the other way. So I just about managed to achieve that, and then what I did was I set limits on the servo through each end so that the servo isn't binding at either end of the travel. Now I have actually ended up with having more travel on the servo than I need, so if I wanted to I could have the ramp going more vertical at the end of its travel. For the time being I'm not doing that because I actually want to preserve the back here, and if I wanted to make the ramp travel further, then this piece here with the screw that I filed down would have to come through this area here. I may eventually end up doing that, but at the moment I'm not going to. So just to show you what it looks like from underneath, and what I did with the servo was I actually reduced the speed to about 2% because this transmitter actually allows me to do that. So I'll just show you quickly. Now I set 3-position servo travel at the moment, and that is in order that I can set the thing up. When it's finished I'm only going to have 2-position, I expect. So that goes all the way to the end, and you can see here how the bolt is virtually touching the end here, and that if I wanted more movement I would just cut out the area there. Now when I put the truck up the other way and we don't have gravity going against us, this is how it looks. So that seems to be working fine. What I'll do now is I'll just go ahead and do the other side, because I'm going to be putting a second servo in over here and I'm going to be using a Y lead, and I don't really want to have to put in a servo reverser. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use another one of these servos, and it's going to need to go the same way around as the other one. I'm going to aim to get it in a similar sort of space, but it's probably going to end up about there. I'll come back when I've done this. Okay, so that's the second side cut out, the servo screw put in there, and a 2mm piece of rod put in the other end, and 2.5mm holes drilled in the main body on both sides. I've also filed down the bolt and put a 1.5mm hole in it, and I've made up a wire of about the right length just by looking at the one over here and using my Z bender to get the bends in it. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a Y lead in here, and temporarily it's all running over the outside. When I've finished, I'm going to be threading the cables through here, hopefully out of the hole which I made in the earlier stage on the opposite side to where I put the switch, and then that should be able to go in there. Now I've got the ramps set in the down position, and what I'm trying to do here is just to get the two the same as each other. So turn on the transmitter, I'm putting the two servos on top of each other to make sure that they're both at the same angle. Just going to go through the very end hole here with a 1.5mm bit to make it easier to get the servo rod in. Now sometimes these servo rods won't exactly go in straight, so I'm going to see how this goes. That's there, and you can see how we need it to come across a bit, getting it right at the end there and giving it a good bend. Let's see where we end up. That looks as if it's going to be okay without fouling too much or anything. Threading the servo arm on for the first time. That's gone straight on, and there possibly needs to be a little bend in there, and that needs to come that way. Only a small amount's needed, but I really don't want the servo to be under any strain, because otherwise it will just buzz. Just a bit more. I think I'm happy with that, and I'm just going to quickly test the range of movement, so putting that in about the same place as the other one. Let's see. This one's moving further than this one, so I'm just going to do the bolt up one turn to make the hole slightly closer to the ramp. I would say that those two are virtually identical to each other now. With this servo here, putting the screw in is easy from this side here. This one here isn't, because it's got a plastic piece there, so I think that I might just as well put the screw in now. Some isopropyl alcohol on both surfaces that are going to be stuck, because otherwise they won't stay stuck for very long. And then, looking at where this ramp here is, where it's raised very, very slightly, I need to get this other servo here, which I'm butting up against the end there, to be in exactly the same place. And that seems to be about it. A quick test to make sure that we've got full range of movement. That seems okay. And then flipping the truck upside down. There's not much in it, and it's virtually impossible to get them identical. I probably could fiddle around some more, but I think that that's okay. Now the final part of this stage will be to put these wires somewhere tidy. I'm going to attempt to thread them through inside the body and have them coming out there. Having tried one or two different options, I found that making a hole here, and one here, and there was actually already one here which I'd done, I was able to get the wires to travel down inside, drilling a small hole here and a slot in the top to push the wire in. I don't think that's going to try and come out by itself, so those are all neat and tidy. Inside, the receiver is about The receiver comes about here, so that should plug in without too much slack. That ought to be fine. Now I'll just put it back together again. Dean's plug should tuck away. I shouldn't have to get it out with the screwdriver. So the bottom goes in first, and then it actually sits neatly back there. So it's actually gone in better this time, and that shuts with more of a click. I might just go in these areas here and fill them with epoxy, because I could see that in time maybe these screws might break their way through the plastic. So I guess that's about it for this video and the series on the Bruder Transporter. This has been quite a challenge to do, particularly the steering. I think that for me the most enjoyable bit really was doing the ramps. It's been a relatively inexpensive project, where really it was the cost of the truck, which was £40, and that included the Jeep on the back. Then we have the Tamiya gearbox. I think that that's about £8. The 3 servos, £3.50 each, and the speed controller here I'm struggling to remember, but I think that that was quite an expensive, maybe £5 or something. So that, in addition to a fairly bog standard 3-channel radio control, although I would say that the DX4S with its servo slow for the ramps does make a difference, because otherwise they'd be flying up and down. Makes this a relatively inexpensive project. It's quite involved, takes a while to do. No technique in there is particularly difficult. You've just got to take your time and test things as you go along. And the really good thing about this truck is that it's able to interact with other things. In other words, it'll be able to pick up other trucks on the back of it, and it's got a working component on it rather than just something which goes along. I hope you've enjoyed this series and found it interesting, and perhaps given you some ideas for doing something yourself. I'm sure that there are things which could be done differently or better than I have. This was just me making up as I go along, but it has been enjoyable solving the problems as I've come across each of them. I'm really enjoying doing these Bruder conversions. I think that the bodies that they make are just such superb quality, and I think that the level of detail is good. I do enjoy reading and answering the comments which I get on my videos, and I feel very encouraged by any thumbs ups which I get along the way. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and in the next series I think that I'm probably going to be looking at doing the MAN semi-truck with the flatbed trailer on it, and again I'll be looking to automate the ramps in an inexpensive sort of way. So until the next time, thank you very much for watching.